All right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Curt Verone.
And Bill Podszus.
All right. And we are here for another edition of Fire Law Roundup, this time for September 11th of 2023. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Curt Verone. I apologize.
And Bill Podszus.
All right. And we are here for another edition of Fire Law Roundup, this time for
This is the problem.
September 11th of 2023.
All right.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Curt Verone. I
And Bill
apologize.
Podszus.
All right. And we are here for another edition of Fire Law Roundup. There we go. Finally. All right.
Endless loop.
All right. We got it. Boy, you know, it's if I don't handle that properly, and we're doing things a little bit differently today. Brad's not here, and Bill has been gracious enough to join us. And I was hoping it to go a little bit smoother than it did, but again, we're doing things a little bit differently. But Bill is an attorney in New York. He does a lot of defense work. I'm assuming you're still doing defense work for fire departments.
We do mostly municipal here.
Yeah.
We do a lot of, this firm specializes actually in solar and wind energy.
Oh,
So-
I know your old firm, you did a lot of municipal defense work.
Yes, but we're not doing so much of that here.
Okay.
I do miss it.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on today. I appreciate it.
Bill's a retired police officer as well, besides being an attorney. And just before we came on, Bill was explaining that he was he did a lot of work at the World Trade Center as a police officer. And I kind of stopped you, and I said, geez, it'd be better to have that discussion right here. So,
Well, it's a tough day, and I was very surprised and pleasantly surprised when you reached out earlier to ask me on. And I actually thought it was a good diversion to be doing this instead of thinking about what happened 22 years ago. And it's mind-boggling that it's actually 22 years, because I can remember it like it was this morning. I can still smell it. I can still see it. And, everybody remembers the blue that the sky was that day. And every now and then the sky is that very blue. And I'll go out in the morning to walk the dog, and if it happens to be that day the sky is that blue, it just stops me in my tracks.
yeah. I think an awful lot of people from New York and certainly around the world and nationally, but especially from New York, are troubled today. Troubled.
It's a tough day. It's a
Yeah.
very tough day. You can't live in the New York metropolitan area and not know somebody either personally or maybe only once removed from you, either people you went to church with or your neighbors who either were lost there or lost somebody there. And in the town where I live, which is Washingtonville, New York, we have 5 New York City firefighters who were lost that day, who are known as the Washingtonville Five. And we have a beautiful monument in town they created a town park just for this. There's a beautiful granite monument with a flagpole there with the helmets of the 5 firefighters reproduced in bronze. There's memorial bricks with every fire and police victim's name on those bricks. That includes EMS. There's over 400 of them there. One of the fellows lived right around the corner from me. Was Battalion Chief Dennis Devlin. And I remember him waving to me in the morning when I'd walk my dog. And it's strange to still look for those things, and they're not there. And if you'll permit me, the other 4 gentlemen were Lieutenant Glenn Perry, who was covering that day on Ladder 25, firefighter Bob Hamilton, assigned to Squad 41, firefighter Jerry Nevins from Rescue 1, and firefighter Mark Woodford, who, believe it or not, was only told the night before that he had received his transfer to Rescue 5. So those 5 are our local hometown heroes, and the church, they're buried side by side in the church cemetery in town. So sorry to get off on a.
No. It's sobering. It's sobering. And, I knew a couple of the folks that died just from my travels around the country. And I had just met Chief Gansey. In fact, I was with Billy Goldfeder in August of 2001, and met Chief Gansey. I still have his business card. He handed me his business card, and we just talked about general things. And a month later, less than a month later, but
Well,
all right. Well, I'm sorry.
One of the most sobering things is the children of these people are now adults today with children of their own. It's almost an entire generation that's gone by.
Yeah. I know the younger folks in my department, my current department, were not alive, or some of the younger folks might have been 1 or 2 years old, but it's sobering. So
theoretically, you could have started a career and ended it already in the time that's passed.
Certainly, yeah. Well, we got a full week. We got a full week here, and the first case is out of Buffalo. We don't have a lot of details on it, so I kind of hate to even blog about stories where we don't have a copy of the complaint because we don't know any of the details. But it's an unusual case, I think, in that it's alleging a different assortment of discriminations that are happening in their fire academy: race discrimination, ethnicity discrimination, national origin. Again, from the news media, it's hard to tell, but the plaintiffs are a Black man, a Hispanic man, and this is really kind of confusing, a Polish man in his 40s. And the allegations are race, ethnicity, and age discrimination. And I say, I'm not sure about the Polish man, because does that mean he's a Polish citizen? Does it mean he's Polish American?
I was kind of confused by that myself. I think the important point with him is the age.
It is, no doubt, no doubt. Okay, but boy, it's kind of I hate to say sloppy journalism, because people could criticize what I do here and what we do here with Fire Law, but it's just I don't know. But at any rate, the allegation is that there's a problem in that fire academy with inappropriate comments and some other things that are going on. And apparently a former deputy commissioner who was let go, or he was demoted from deputy commissioner back down to captain, also kind of added in, and he apparently submitted an affidavit. Are you up in right now? Are you up in upstate New York, or are you closer to the city?
I'm in Dutchess County right now, so we're a good hour north of the city. More like an hour and a half north of the city.
Like I'm not sure of what's going on up in Buffalo and whether other New York departments are like that. But how do you go from commissioner? Oh, how do you go from captain to commissioner and then back down to?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. All the times I've seen that done, when they wanted to make a commissioner out of somebody who was still serving, that person had to retire.
Yeah. I mean, I think of a commissioner as a civilian.
Exactly. They're civilian positions.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know. I know in FDNY, you see firefighters go from usually chief of department to somewhere deputy commissioner and then maybe commissioner, but they're kind of out of the fire department at that point. So perhaps the commissioner is actually what you and I would refer to as the fire chief. I don't know. Little confusing. I should have asked you. I know Brad is able to get the New York State cases. I can't. I have Lexis, and Lexis doesn't let me get into the case file. Certainly, the decisions I can get, rulings, but in terms of access to the file with the complaints and the pleadings and any of the memorandum and briefs that are done, I don't have access to in New York.
I can try to look it up later.
Yeah. But if you can, and then we, hopefully we can post it there, and then maybe we'll have a little bit more insight. But again, another case. Next one, there's a couple of issues I want to kind of bounce off you here, but this is out of Connecticut. We have a Bridgeport firefighter who was terminated in 2017 for acting, and the quote here is bizarre, but the court also refers to it as strange, unusual, and bizarre. But he was terminated for that. And as it turns out, it appears that he had been terminated in 2012 for similar allegations. And in Connecticut, they like here in Rhode Island under collective bargaining, we would appeal to a AAA arbitrator through collective bargaining. In Connecticut, it goes to a state sort of run panel of 3 arbitrators. And so he appealed, or he grieved his termination in 2012. The appellate arbitration panel ordered him reinstated, but said, termination was too much for what he was accused of, but we'll give him a 30-day suspension without pay. So he's back on the job, but he was basically on notice that you can't be acting, quote unquote, bizarre. Okay. So now he does it again in 2017, and this time he gets terminated. They grieved it. And a couple of points here with the grievance arbitration decision. I thought they did a really good job of explaining just cause. There's a lot of misinformation, misunderstanding about just cause. And they did a good job of explaining, in the 7 different parts, the 7 different aspects that should be considered in a just cause ruling. But at any rate, he wasn't satisfied with that. So then he and the union appealed that to Superior Court. So what we're dealing with here is the Superior Court's decision that upholds the arbitration decision. And one of the issues was apparently his captain in the 2017 incident. His captain videotaped him. Oh, video! Here we go. I'm dating myself by saying tape, but video recorded him. Right? Hey, Dad, what do you mean tape? But video recorded him on a cell phone, and apparently he's alleging that, number one, that violates the department policy, which many departments have a policy that prohibits recording in the workplace, but also violated state law. And Connecticut is one of those states that you've got to have all-party consent to record. Right. But the court kind of brushed over that and said, no, for this purpose, that was a legitimate recording. There was no rule violation. The chief had testified that it was okay, and they upheld the termination. So what do you think about that, though? Like in those states, I think New York is one of the states, right? You're an all-party state for recording.
We're a one-party state.
One-party state. That's, yeah. And I think there's 36 states that are one-party. So some like 13 or 14 that are all-party states. But go ahead.
We really don't get much of a mental picture, so to speak, as to what was going on here when I say bizarre behavior.
Right.
Was he doing backflips across the apparatus bay and everybody was there videoing him, and he clearly knew he was being recorded? We don't know.
Yeah, one of the things I discuss in my discipline class, and I emphasize the same thing, and you're gonna pick up on it immediately with your police background, is the difference between facts and conclusions. And bizarre behavior is a conclusion, right? Spell it out factually. What was it that led you to the conclusion that the behavior was bizarre? And we don't see any discussion of the facts.
There's a lot here that's not being disclosed to us, but clearly they crossed their T's and dotted their I's, or they would not have achieved this result. And I thought that from an administrative point of view, from the agency's point of view, that they really did a good job of following their policies and procedures here.
Yeah, and I agree. And what we're dealing like with 2 steps removed, because we're dealing with not the facts of what happened, but we're dealing with what the arbitrator said, but we're not even dealing with what the arbitrator said. We're dealing with what the court said, the arbitrator said.
Right.
So we're a little bit removed from the factual point, and we got to assume that there are facts that substantiate this. One of the things I thought was troubling here is when he had the opportunity at various points to explain his behavior, he didn't.
He didn't, exactly.
You know,
Very strange.
And you know, you would think that if maybe he was having some sort of you know, family problems or, you know, chemical imbalance or whatever it may be, that he would have said, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done it. This is what caused me to do it, and I'm sorry. He didn't do that. He just, like,
I also didn't see anything in here where he availed himself or tried to avail himself of any sort of employee assistance program.
Yeah. Yeah. And that may well have been, he might have, but it didn't get in here.
know.
But again, the you know, I agree with you. It looks like the city did a good job. Couple of takeaways from this one, or one big takeaway is folks who are concerned or maybe a little bit confused about what is just cause. Both the panel, the arbitration panel, and then the court did a good job of explaining those 7 things. I've got them in bold print. You can see them right there. But those are 7 commonly considered issues to be dealt with regard to just cause. There is no single definition of just cause, and generally it's up to each employer to come up with their own definition of it, unless it's been defined either in statute or maybe a city charter or something, collective bargaining agreement. But pretty comprehensive explanation of just cause there.
Well, you know, just cause really in layman's terms is a reason. And
right.
Those are your 7 steps to arrive at a good solid reason. And I think, you know, what's spelled out there is really a good primer for anybody who is just starting to become involved perhaps in a union as a union rep or whatnot, that those are the things you really need to look at in a situation. I mean, you can check off the boxes there. And again, from the administration's point of view, it really underscores to me the importance of training, especially because when you look here at point number 2, you know, being fair notice. Well, that gentleman clearly had fair notice with a 30-day rip. But, you know, if you start at the beginning of a career, what are the folks in training telling you, and how much are you learning along the way? You know, at what point were you distinctly told, and at what point does it become, well, you know, you've been here long enough, you should have known. You know, so it really, to me, and I was an instructor in the police department, which I absolutely loved that job. And as we all know, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And, you know, in so much of this litigation, it's who taught you, what qualified him to teach you, et cetera, et cetera. You know, do you have your good attendance lists? Do you have your quizzes and whatnot to show that learning occurred? Or is it just, you know, okay, here, this is how you this is how you use a set of irons, you know, hit the Halligan with the sledgehammer. You're now fully qualified in the use of this tool. You know, is that going to fly in a courtroom?
Well, and I do want folks to know that you are also a firefighter. Okay, you have background as a police officer, but your heart is in the fire service.
I'm an adrenaline junkie. I can't get enough.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to the next one, because we've got quite a few interesting cases this week. So, boy, this next one is a tough one. It's not the only suicide case that is currently pending with regard to a fire department employee. This one's a little bit different, but we're out in California, the South Placer Fire District. And we've got a kid who apparently was a Marine veteran, and his dad had been a mechanic in this fire department. He in turn became a mechanic in the fire department. The allegations are, and again, I don't think, we don't have a copy of the complaint. So again, we're going secondhand based on what the news media has told us. But the allegations are that there was a known problem employee, as quoted from the newspaper, known problem employee who had been harassing this kid. It led to him committing suicide, and he committed suicide on fire department property outside of one of their fire stations. Really kind of tragic.
On video.
Oh, I didn't pick up
I
on
thought
that
it was
part.
in watching the news clip.
There was something I didn't. Go ahead.
My understanding was that it was caught on a surveillance video and then the video was erased.
I saw that and I wasn't sure exactly. I hadn't pieced it together. Your law enforcement perspective on it, I think, is absolutely correct. I wasn't thinking of it as a surveillance video. I wasn't really sure how it fit in, but bottom line is the kid is dead. The family is suing the department for wrongful death and for not reeling this particular gentleman who was doing the harassing in. So, tragic. And I've got two other cases that are still out there pending. Both of those suicides involve female firefighters. So we're still waiting on settlements, either settlements or trials on both of those. So this is the third one that we've got where there's a wrongful death suit involving some sort of harassment directed toward an employee.
We had a suicide years ago in my firehouse, a young woman.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, but what
She was not, to my knowledge, she was not being harassed. She was a very outgoing individual, one of these bubbly, for lack of a better term, type of personalities. And everybody was just completely dumbfounded by it. She was into the training. She loved going to the fire training center. Mm-hmm. I have no answers. Yeah. If anybody else has them, I'm not aware of it. But it's so incredibly. I'm sorry, Curt.
No, it's a difficult thing, and Bill, I don't know if I had shared this with you, but I've gone back to school. I've been studying forensic psychology, which I really think they ought to incorporate a lot of that training into law school. So much of it crosses, in terms of intent, understanding intent, and the capacity to confess, and mental states, and knowledge about people's recollection and eyewitness testimony. We cover all of that type of thing, but we do dabble a little bit into the sort of substantive psychology as well. And the problem with suicide, there are many several personality disorders that folks are prone to an early demise through suicide. And you just don't know, you just don't know. People hide things from other people, and you might not see that something that could be a tell, but sometimes it's a very difficult area.
This is so incredibly sad. I mean, this is such a young fella. Had served his country in the Marine Corps, had his whole life ahead of him. What was going on there? In my time in the police department, we had several. In fact, just a couple of months ago, one of the fellows that I worked with, he was retired. He shot himself in the backyard, and nobody knows why.
I think law enforcement suicide rate is a little higher.
It's higher. It is. It is.
Yeah.
But, and this kind of ties back to the age discrimination case that we touched on before. We had a fella come into my job, well, my former job. I still call it my job. Mm-hmm. I think he was 40 at the time, similar to this. Maybe he was a little less, or 35 or 40. And we teased him. We broke his horns, but it was a different time. And you just can't do that anymore.
It's
the supervisors, the administration has to be so in tune to proper procedures and screening. And it makes me wonder if you went back to the beginning and you looked through the application and you looked at the investigation that was conducted when the individual came on the job. And the police backgrounds are far more thorough than the fire backgrounds, at least in my experience.
No, they are. No doubt.
Was there something there? But the flip side to that is, again, when I was in the police department, we had a young fella, second generation, maybe even a third generation cop. His brothers were cops, and he killed himself.
Mhm.
And very, very sad. Young guy had the world by the sneakers, so to speak. And they had brought in a grief counselor, and this really rubbed me the wrong way. And he asked, well, who can tell me about so-and-so? And for whatever reason, he pointed at me, and I said, well, this is what I recall of him. He's brand new, 21 years old, new car, different girl every week, maybe every 2 weeks, blah, blah. He was living a life of Riley. And the counselor turned around, he goes, well, then this is your fault. Excuse me? How is this my fault? And he's like, well, those are warning signs, blah, blah,
Oh,
blah, blah.
geez.
Well, okay, I know there are warning signs,
Yeah.
but you need to make people in charge aware of what those signs are. Are your supervisors trained to look for these things?
Yeah. Well, I think the warning signs for people with different types of personality disorders are going to be entirely different. So what's going to cause a narcissist to commit suicide versus what's going to cause a borderline to commit suicide are going to be entirely different. So that's
Right.
throw that one right out the window.
But
And then
in the police job and the fire job, you have to be successful at it. You have to be so good at so many different things.
yeah,
You are chief cook and bottle washer. You're not a trained psychotherapist. You're not a this, you're not a that. You're a firefighter. You're a fire supervisor. You're a fire chief. You're a commissioner. But what's being done to, educate those people in at least some rudimentaries
Yeah.
as to what to look for? You don't have to walk out of it with a PhD, but there's got to be something we can do better. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think there is. I think there is. And one of the things here, at least an allegation here, is that he was being harassed, and the department knew he was being harassed, and failed to do anything about it. So again, these are allegations. Who knows if they're true or not? Sometimes when people suffer a loss, they're looking for someone to blame or some sort of way to rationalize what happened. And maybe there's some substance to them, maybe there's not. We don't know, but
True.
certainly harassment of someone seems to be a consistent theme with many of the suicides that we see. Not everyone, certainly, but of many of them. The reason I was asking, you said the female, both of the cases that I'm tracking involved the female who committed suicide who was married to a firefighter in the same organization.
Wow.
And so not that that's a risk factor. I don't mean to suggest it's a risk factor, but it is, a fact pattern that, maybe it puts a little bit more pressure on her. And maybe she's a little bit more concerned, and that can add to the stress level that, who knows? I don't know, but I just thought it was concerning. But certainly this is, difficult case. All right, here we go. This is the one that I thought, and I still think is probably going to take up a lot of our time today. Is this case out of Baltimore County? And let me kind of go through the facts. And I've got a couple of questions for you, because I know you do a lot of litigation here, and maybe a little bit outside the wheelhouse of what you're doing today. But I don't understand how part of this works. But at any rate, what we've got is we have a firefighter who apparently was either taking or assembling nude pictures or lewd pictures of female firefighters within the Baltimore County Fire Department. And the department, through a firefighter who received a request for a picture of someone that works with that firefighter, male firefighter receives a request from this alias firefighter who didn't identify himself. He exchanges it or informs a battalion chief, who in turn forwards the picture or the request on to the department, and apparently they don't start an investigation. Although the department did not start an investigation, but he did. The division chief did refer it to the county cyber crimes unit. Okay. So the police were notified, but the department didn't start an investigation, which I think, sometimes that's probably that may be a wise thing to do. Especially where you're trying to figure out who someone is, and you don't necessarily want to start this internal investigation, which could cause you not to be able to find out who this person is. So at any rate, they notify the police, they don't initiate an investigation themselves. Subsequently, there's another incident involving the pictures. The police are able to identify, and it seems like it was like about, let's see, from June 26th of 2017 that started. Yeah, about 2 months, not even a full 2 months, but yeah, you're right, pretty close. They're able to figure out who it is, and then at that point, the person is suspended, and again, whatever happens, he opts to resign. The department, I guess, or the police department considered some sort of a revenge porn charge, but in the end of the day, apparently they didn't charge him criminally. So the victims, apparently it was 8 or so victims, or nine victims, contacted an attorney. They must have filed with the EEOC. My understanding is, how many?
So we had 11.
11, could be 11. Yeah. So, but yeah, I see up to 11 in there, and but they must have notified the EEOC, or Maryland's equivalent of the EEOC, the Human Relations Commission, who then must have, I'm assuming, referred it to the U.S. attorney, which on valid cases they refer it to the U.S. attorney to see if the U.S. attorney is going to prosecute or take up the case, and if not, they issue a right to sue letter. And in this case, the U.S. attorney apparently, took up the case, and but apparently there was some negotiation that went on with Baltimore County, and I'm assuming because they were cooperating with it. But at any rate, what we've got now is a situation where the U.S. attorney, on behalf of the United States of America, files suit against Baltimore County on, what day was it? Whatever day it was, they file suit. So it would have been 6 days ago, whatever that was, file suit, and then almost simultaneously offers a settlement agreement, which appears to have been pre-negotiated with the county, and is then supposedly, at some point, the judge is going to rubber stamp it, and that will resolve the case. It's going to be some payments to the females or the people, the victims involved. I think there's a total of $270,000.
275,000 each, I believe.
Yeah. So
and it looked like 2 of them were left out of it. 1 or 2 of them. As far as notifications go, it looks like number 5 is missing and number 8 is missing. Okay. Victims 5 and 8. Yeah, I don't know what that's all about.
Yeah, I guess my and again, this is more of a lawyer question than a firefighter question. In fact, I hope it doesn't turn off some of the firefighters in the room. But in order for a federal court to have jurisdiction, there has to be a case or controversy where the U.S. attorney and Baltimore County have agreed to something. Where is the case or controversy?
I had the same question when I was reading it before, and I thought maybe the photographs going back and forth on the internet, maybe there's a federal jurisdiction there.
There's definitely federal jurisdiction, but there's not, to me, where everybody agrees. How is there a case of controversy?
I don't practice in federal, so
yeah, I know that here in state court here in Rhode Island, I've been involved in a couple of these. They call it a friendly suit. Okay, and often we'll do a friendly suit. And that's not the right term. There's a term for it, but it's basically a non-contested suit. But essentially, it's where, like, let's say you have a 12-year-old kid who gets the case. One of the case I had was a 12-year-old kid who got hit in the face with a pellet gun. And the insurance company wanted to settle. The homeowner's coverage was going to cover it. The shooter's homeowners was going to cover it. But the kid was at 15 at the time. He can't settle it.
Right.
There's a question about whether or not the parents can settle it. So that you file a lawsuit, they appoint a guardian ad litem. Everybody agrees the kid's going to get X amount of dollars. And the guardian ad litem says, yes, it looks like a fair settlement. The judge looks at what the guardian ad litem says. And to me, that's not a case of controversy. But it's under state law. We don't have an Article 3 issue in the Constitution. This is a federal case. And in order for a federal court to have legal jurisdiction in a case, there has to be a case of controversy. And where everybody agrees, how is there a case of controversy?
I thought the same thing when I read it.
Again, state law is one thing. I can understand where everybody agrees, but so, I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe I need to do a little bit more research, go back to law school and restudy this, because maybe there is a case of controversy when there's the potential, even though everybody agrees. But the jurisdictional issue for courts is limited to where there's an actual case of controversy. You can't just go resolving things without a case of controversy. So
hopefully we can figure it out without having to go back to law school. Who wants to do that?
We'll go to Lexis, and I'm sure there's probably case law on it. So I should have done the research before I opened my big mouth. But that was one of the first things. And I don't know, what do you think from your perspective on this?
There's an awful lot of moving parts in this. There's a lot of people, you got a lot of victims, and I'm wondering, because this really is more of a police investigation, or should be, than an internal fire investigation.
I agree.
The fire department has to do their due diligence, et cetera. And maybe that consists of nothing more than bringing in law enforcement, documenting everything that they did. And an investigation of this nature, and I'm guessing Baltimore County, it says they have a cyber crimes unit. If this is Sleepy Town, USA, they're probably not going to be adequately staffed and equipped and trained to do that type of an investigation. But you're going to have to bring in state police or sheriff's office, whoever's got that unit, to do that, and do this carefully. It's something that didn't exist when I was there. It was in its infant stages. But the guys that do this now, and the women that do this now, it's amazing how much stuff they can find. It's not my cup of tea, but the last thing you want is some well-intentioned but ham-fisted firefighter or fire lieutenant or whatever muddying up the waters on this by doing something wrong. And maybe the reason that the fire department didn't do anything for 2 months was at the request of law enforcement. We don't know that. Right.
And I would think, if I'm representing the fire department, I am not suggesting that we go out and start an investigation on our own. Where there's possible criminal offenses, and I think there still is the potential for federal, like you suggested, like use of the internet to share inappropriate images. There could be some criminal aspects to that maybe even the FBI or Secret Service may have some concerns over. And but at any rate, postal authorities, whoever is involved in regulating the transmission of those types of images. And I'm not seeing where the U.S. attorney is justifiably criticizing the fire department for taking a slow approach, and an approach that's not going to interfere with the law enforcement investigation here.
But they did the right thing from the get-go.
It seems like that to me. And
the firefighter notified the chief immediately, who was right there. That chief notified the next highest chief. So it was addressed immediately. It's what was step 2 or step 3. It's like we know the beginning of the story, we know the end of the story, but what happened in between? And that's not all here for us to review.
Right.
But again, it underscores the importance of dotting your I's and crossing your T's and keeping proper documentation. Firefighter so-and-so came to me on XYZ date and time and made the following complaint. What did you do? Again, if it's not documented, it didn't happen.
Right. So a difficult case.
Very complex.
And it's over now. I mean, it's not like we're going to have some other proceeding on it, other than if there's the possibility of criminal charges against the employee involved.
It almost looked to me like his resignation was the resolution to it. It doesn't say that.
Right.
But that's kind of what it looked like.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a police officer, did you make rank within the police?
I was a sergeant, yes.
Sergeant, okay. So, and did you do any work in internal affairs?
No, I did not.
Okay, that's probably good. Probably a good thing. But
I've answered some questions in internal affairs, but that's another story.
That's where I'm going. That's where I'm going. Going at Garrity here. And so you're familiar enough with Garrity to kind of discuss it. This is loaded with Garrity issues here because we don't know who that person is. And if we start calling people in and ordering them to answer questions, now we've inadvertently stumbled into a Garrity problem. Because of the nature of these things, I mean, it's not like a sexual assault, but it is a sexual in nature, what's going on here. And as a general rule, most prosecutors, and I'm assuming most police officers, do not want anyone interviewing victims. For the potential of contaminating recollection, and until we get a clean statement from them. And all of that is at risk when the fire department starts its own investigation without giving the police department an opportunity to complete their part of this.
But the risk too is, or I should say, there's also a risk in letting things go for a length of time before you do your interviews, because as time goes on, memories fade, well, I swear it was blue. I know it was blue. I know it was blue. Well, in reality, it was green.
Right.
I mean, that happens. Okay. And, people tell you, oh, I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't talk to anybody. But, instead of getting those 3 or 4, or whatever number of pure individual accounts, now you're getting one homogenized account.
Yep.
Because chances are these people spoke to each other and blah, blah, from an investigator's point of view, if everybody's got the same story, something's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, that's we study that in forensic psychology, and one of the big studies that we looked at was a woman, Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, was really at the forefront of this, but she has reached the conclusion that every time you go back and think about a memory, you subtly change your recollection of that memory. And it might be slight, it could be varied, but like when you go back and you think about the worst thing that ever happened to you, each time you think about it, it tends to get a little bit worse. And when you think about a good memory, it tends to get a little bit better. But there's documented research on this now, so that we know that it's almost like you go back to the old yarn about the story about the fish that somebody caught, and it was this big, and then it's this big, and then it's this big. There's actually research that supports that there's a biological reason for this happening, or an explanation for this happening. So that would be the concern, and certainly you don't want to let it go too long, but the fire department can't get out in front of an investigation where there's potential criminal charges and you don't know who the accused is, and where the victims are the victims of some sort of sex-based criminal offense. I don't know. I can't fault the fire department for not starting an investigation sooner than this. I'm be very reluctant.
I can't fault them because we don't know the facts.
That too.
We don't know all the facts, but I know that if Brad was here, he'd be screaming, going, "Keep your clothes on." We wouldn't be having this conversation if you kept your clothes on. And it reminded me of a case I was involved in earlier this year. It wasn't a fire department case, but it involved the sexting. Okay. Mm-hmm. And of course, labor relations and all the rest of that. And in doing the research for it, I found that the FBI has a problem with sexting within their own ranks.
It's the same gene pool. Bill, it's the same gene pool we're hiring from.
You're right. You're absolutely right. But at a certain point, we do expect you to know better.
Yeah, I
Well,
guess
maybe the bar is too high. I'm sorry.
I guess, you know, I did some work with the Public Agency Training Council for a number of years, and they do a lot of law enforcement training. And I had no idea of the problems that law enforcement has. I know fire problems. I've lived fire problems. I know, but you know, their problems are just a different dimension of the same problem. Whereas a firefighter may do something that's police officers like, wow, you gotta be kidding me. Right? You doing what in the squad car?
I can't make this stuff up. But one
So,
of the things
and
that struck
the
me is you've
FBI
got
would just be, right? The FBI would just be another, it's the same, you know, maybe I
it's a
think,
microcosm of society.
yeah,
All of our agencies are microcosms of society. But I was struck by the number of victims.
yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, don't you folks have uniforms? Do you why are there so many pictures of naked employees?
Yeah, and again, I don't know how many are naked, how many are in bikinis, or how many
Right.
are whatever, but
Lewd photos, call them whatever you want.
You know,
Maybe I shouldn't say naked, but
I think
compromising.
about,
Let's say compromising.
I think about what, like when I was 17, 18, 19, 20, what it was like, you couldn't hide a camera. And it was
Correct.
35 millimeter or some sort of thing like that, you know, if you're going to take a picture on a date or whatever you're doing with you know, with someone of the opposite sex or the same sex for that matter, I guess. But point being, things are different today. And I don't know. I'm not sure the law's caught up with a lot of this. So,
Well, I had a boss at the police department that used to dismiss the roll calls by saying, don't do anything to embarrass yourself. Don't do anything to embarrass the department, and we'll have a good day. And those are words of wisdom.
well, I'm guessing the folks that were saying that back in the day for you are similar to the folks who were saying that to me as a young firefighter, and they were part of the greatest generation. And many of them were part of the greatest generation, and they just, I think they'd be losing their minds if they saw what was going on today. So
Agreed.
all right, this last story here, there was two cases, and I was trying to decide which of the two I was going to blog about on that given day, and I said I'll just do it about both of them because they're very similar. But we've got two lawsuits from the two, at least as far as I am aware, the two largest wildland fire agencies in the United States, CAL FIRE and the U.S. Forest Service. And I know the U.S. Forest Service, many people don't think of them as a fire department. I had the opportunity to visit their headquarters in Washington, D.C. And when you walk in that building, it is crystal clear that their primary mission is firefighting. There's everything, the pictures on the wall, it's all about firefighting. They are an incredibly important wildland fire department. And it have a lot of resources, but at any rate, to me, you know, the U.S. Forest Service is indeed a fire department, regardless.
Doesn't the Bureau of Land Management get involved in a lot of that too?
They do too. So the U.S. Forest Service covers U.S. forests. Bureau of Land Management covers, I forget what their jurisdiction is, National Park Service. So each of them has firefighting capabilities. But in my experience, the U.S. Forest Service is primarily a fire department. They may plant some trees, they may do some other stuff, but they are primarily a fire department. That was brought home to me when I visited their headquarters. So, but at any rate, the first fire that we'll talk about was I guess both of them were in California. But the first one was a fire that let's see, that was
the Bobcat fire.
Yeah, it's the first one. Yeah, the Bobcat fire, and they're looking for, I think that was a relatively small one. And they're only looking for about $1 million. And then the second one was the big one. That was the fire.
I don't recall seeing a name of that.
Maybe I got it backwards here. U.S. Fire Service filed suit against Southern California Edison and utility trees over the Bobcat fire. Yeah. Okay. So that's the first one. The second one is the smaller one. I apologize. The second one was filed by Cal Fire for just over $1 million for a fire that burned 680 acres, destroyed 28 structures in San Bernardino County. But the first one, what was the name of that one? I
don't recall seeing a name in here.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sorry. The first one is the Bobcat fire. Yeah. First one is the Bobcat fire. The second one is I don't know. It's in there.
We'll call it fire number 2.
Yeah, we'll call it fire number 2. But boy, the first one, the cost was $120 million. And I know it was the big fire. This was $120 million. And actually, I think it was a little bit over $120 million in damages. You got $56 million in suppression costs, $65 million for damages, and some other additional emergency response costs of close to $800,000. So just incredible. And we're starting to see more of these suits. I know the Maui, I didn't cover it last week, but Maui now is being sued. Maui filed suit to recoup some of their costs, but now Maui is in fact being sued. The county of Maui and the state of Hawaii is being sued as defendants. So this is going to that Maui case is probably going to end up as a mass tort litigation.
Well, the pictures are just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Of what's going on out there. And I saw on the news over the weekend that they've lowered the death toll.
Oh.
They had it was over 100 at one point, but I heard on the news the other night it was down to 66.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, considering that, I thought it was going to go the other way. The way that they were saying originally was over 100 dead and 1,000 missing, and then it got down to 800, then 700, and so.
But the devastation, it looks it's a war zone. Is what it looks like.
Oh, for sure.
It's horrible.
Sure, yeah, and you'll never, you can rebuild, but it'll never have the, the same charm. You just don't build. We don't build the same way that we used to build. So no one does.
Plus,
but,
the trees are gone, et cetera, et cetera. It's not the same place.
Yeah. Yep. So, but so the Maui lawsuits are sort of in the air, and but these two suits I thought were pretty noteworthy. One for $1 million brought by Cal Fire, the other brought by the U.S. Fire Service for $120 million against the utility. So again, we're seeing an awful lot of these types of suits, and certainly I think the utility companies, several of whom have gone bankrupt, and many more may in fact be bankrupt. I guess the second suit wasn't against a utility, it was against a general contractor that caused the spark, but the utility-based suits have led to the bankruptcy of, I think it was Pacific Gas and Electric and some other electric utility companies out in California. So
But this is interesting though, because this centers around the maintenance of one tree. Whereas in Hawaii, the whole problem, so to speak, there is their whole theory and manner, the manner in which they maintain their wildland management, same as in Canada.
Yeah.
That seems to be the reason they have those big fires up there, is because their approach to land management and fire controlled burns, et cetera, is different than ours. But I thought this was incredible for $120 million. and the genesis of it is one tree.
Hmm.
You know, if you go through the complaint, it talks about, you know, pruning marks on this tree show that the wires had been in this canopy for a period of years, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So from little things come great things. Great meaning large, not wonderful.
Yeah. There's a thing that I noticed from just digging into some of these cases, is that there are environmental groups that are responsible for filing dozens, if not hundreds, of lawsuits against the U.S. Forest Service and CAL FIRE and a number of other entities trying to stop their efforts to clear land to stop these kinds of fires.
Didn't you and Brad speak about that about 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, and what I didn't really talk about the volume of these lawsuits, and that involved a couple of entities in one jurisdiction. That entity had filed a number of lawsuits, but I'm finding more and more of these entities out there, and I'm sure they feel like they're righteous and they're doing the right thing, and the Fire Service is doing it wrong, and if people would just listen to them, the world would be better, and all of that. And I think, you know, every war we've ever fought was because someone felt that they were right and someone else was wrong, and, you know, you're not going to listen to me, therefore we're gonna start a war with you. And litigation to me is a mini form, a civilized form of warfare. About, you won't listen to me, oh yeah, well, I'm going to show you.
Define civilized, counselor.
Right. That's how we call it, civil law, right? So they're not out with hatchets going at it. But at any rate, these environmental groups are just like tying the Fire Service and CAL FIRE in knots. And I'm not talking about just one lawsuit, I'm talking about dozens. So all you got to do is, you know, pick the group. In fact, if you do Alexa search for U.S. Fire Service or USDA Fire Service, and look at all of the lawsuits, you'll start seeing the same entity suing them time and time again. They'll file one on October 1st and another on October 5th and another one, October 12th. And you're just like, holy crap.
They are being sweated at law. Yeah,
you know, it's almost to the point of being considered one of those litigious plaintiffs. And at any rate, I think somehow I've got to find a balance between resolving all this stuff in court and fixing the problem before everything has burned up, because it certainly seems like we're having more and more of these big fires.
Well, I was looking before online, and it was a graph showing the wildfires in California, the millions of acres burned over, like, say, the last 10 or 15 years. Mm-hmm. And it just goes like this. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's certainly concerning. And we have my point when we talked about this with Brad is that, we have elected officials, we have Congress, we have state legislatures, we have agencies. That is who we put in charge of trying to figure this stuff out. And it's really unfortunate that sometimes we get courts issuing injunctions to block certain things that government has decided to do. And we've got to find a better way. Sort of piecemeal litigation is going to prevent us from really coming up with some solutions to this. As well-intentioned as judges may be in deciding cases, as well-intentioned as some of the environmental groups may be, that we've got to find a better solution to this.
I agree.
All right, well, that's going to do it for another edition of Fire Law Roundup. Bill, I really want to thank you for filling in. I believe we're going to have another vacancy next week. I'll give you a shout and see if you're up for it next week. But Brad is in Italy, or headed to Italy for a little bit of a vacation. I know. So. But at any rate, that's going to do it for another edition of Fire Law Roundup. Thank you all, and we'll see you again next week.